Welcome to Housewives of True Crime YouTube channel. I'm Tab,
I'm Gretch.
and we're going to tell you a quick story about this week's crime that we do on our podcast. And if you want more details, go to Housewives of True Crime podcast to get all the juicy stuff. But this week, it's you, Gretch.
All right, well, let me tell you, Tab. Today's case is the case of Pam Phillips and Gary Triano. Pam and Gary met at a party at Gary's home in Tucson, Arizona in the 80s and married in a splashy shindig on a yacht less than a year after they first laid eyes on each other.
Hot damn.
Hot
Yachting.
damn, right?
Right? Yachties.
So yachty. The only issue was that the party where they first laid eyes on each other was thrown by Gary's wife. So,
Ex-wife?
No, current wife.
Okay.
But so no shame in Pam's game, right?
Right.
So she thought she had hit the jackpot with the new lifestyle that being married to Gary had accustomed her to. They rolled flashy, right? All over the world, jet setting, hanging out in their fancy pants. But as luck would have it, Gary stopped rolling in it.
Oh, it happens from time to time.
It happens. It was a real drag. He had his money in real estate, and when the market crashed, he was upside down. So he decided to dump some of the money that he had left into various international casinos and ended up doing business with not so legit investors. So these were the type of people that you wouldn't want to owe money to.
Gotcha.
And
Lobsters?
Lobsters.
Lobsters. Okay, not mobsters, lobsters.
That's right.
That's what I call people that lob on the tennis court.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Gary owed a lot of money. He ended up filing for bankruptcy and owing something like $25 million.
Ooh. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. Well, Pam was like, when I said richer or poor, I just meant richer. So Pam was really into being rich. So she divorced Gary and takes herself and her two young children to the luxurious mountain town of Aspen. So Pam had a plan. She was going to get herself booed up with a new man, but this time she wasn't going to mess around with anyone less than a $20 million net worth.
Why not?
I mean, that sounds pretty good.
If you have your options.
Right? Well, granted, this was 30 years ago.
Oh, shoot.
So, I mean, that's like 50 million now.
At least.
I think she aimed high. Okay. So she's telling all this to the nanny she hired because finding Mr. Moneybags meant that said nanny was going to need to work a lot of evenings. Well, she did as much socializing, social climbing, all that kind of stuff as possible. Of course, the nanny is like, no problem. But after he got to know Pam and got to know it's expensive to be Pam, he was a little confused when she seemed to be hooking up with the neighbor who clearly did not have it going on in the financials. His name was Ron Young, and he was pretty shady. He had fraudulated a couple of local businesses, and after hooking up with Pam for a while, he skipped town. So police investigating him ended up impounding his van, and when they did, they found maps of Tucson and Pam and Gary's divorce papers. Well, they didn't know what to make of that until someone bombed Gary Triano's car in a dramatic explosion.
It was a case that captivated Tucson, Arizona for almost 18 years. The bombing assassination of a high-flying millionaire businessman named Gary Triano. It's a tangled case with endless theories and twisted plots.
That made headlines all over. And by the way, Gary died in the explosion.
I was going to ask, Gary's in the car in the explosion.
Gary was in the
Yeah,
car.
that's some crazy ass shit. Like bombing a car is a lot.
Well, you know what else? It was the kind of bomb where they said someone had to be watching and detonate it. Yeah.
Oh my God, that is awful.
Right? Okay, well, when this happened, it made the news all over, and a detective in Aspen saw and he heard the name Gary Triano and got to thinking, I've heard that name before. And then he put it together that he had seen it on Shady Ron's paperwork in his van.
Right.
So this detective calls the Tucson detective and says, hey, I've got this guy. I don't know what the connection is, but you should look into him. Well, the Tucson detective told him, I will look into him as soon as I get through the laundry list of other possible suspects, because like I told you, Gary had done business with some unsavory peoples. Well, they got to going through that list and it took a long time. The case went cold for a while, and then they finally circled back to Ron after almost 10 years.
Whoa.
When they found him, Ron made it real easy to connect the dots that Pam and him had colluded to kill Gary for the $2 million insurance policy she collected because he'd been taping their conversations on cassettes. And he wrote
Cassette
down
tapes.
That's right.
How do you
Remember
even
those?
do that? Like you put it on speakerphone and then you have like a Walkman next to you, or how do you?
I feel like I had an answering machine service.
Oh.
And you could record the tape. You could save your messages.
Yes. Okay. I remember that.
I might have done that when the boys called.
You wanted to re-listen.
Yeah.
You're like, I got a boy calling me.
Yeah. I had my own line.
Oh my
so
gosh.
cool.
Oh, you were so cool.
Right?
Did you have call waiting too?
I don't think so.
Oh no. You don't know how many boys could have been calling then.
Yeah, I was pretty sure I was lucky just to get the one. But, you know, what to do? Anyhow, in addition to all those cassette tapes, Gary had written down all the payments that Pam had been making him over the years. Well, that seems like a lot of evidence, right?
Yeah.
And Ron had so nicely cataloged it for the Tucson police, but it still took them a minute to criminally charge Ron and Pam. And then it took them another minute to extradite Pam from Austria because Pam had finally found her Mr. Money over in the Europe. She was whooping it up and she did not feel like coming back and faces the consequences of her tangled web.
Yeah. Well, who would?
Who
Really?
would, right?
No.
But eventually she did.
Okay.
And both her and Ron were found guilty and sentenced to life. At her sentencing, she spoke and she was real adamant that she was real innocent.
I just want everybody to know that I am innocent. I am innocent. I am innocent, okay? And I'm really, this is hard. It's so hard for me. It's a nightmare. This is a nightmare, okay? It's happened, it's a nightmare. And Gary was my husband, okay? Gary was my husband, and he was the father of my children.
And I think she had a pretty compelling defense, although I'm 90% sure she is where she belongs. So I think to hear all the details about that and more, check out our podcast, Housewives of True Crime.
There are more details there, especially on why Gretchen thinks that Pam could have maybe not been involved in this. However, I also think that Pam is, there's just a thing about Pam.
There is a thing about Pam, right?
Yeah, and my aunt's name is Pam, so I love Pam's, but
my aunt's name is Pam too.
Oh. Well,
okay.
Anyway, so check us out on Housewives of True Crime Podcast. Please like and subscribe. Also here, if this is your first time watching us, and we will be back next week with a new crime.